Move over Twitter files, newly released court documents reveal that major leaders and stars at Fox News knowingly signal boosted disinformation and knowingly platformed conspiracy theorists to help Donald Trump steal the 2020 presidential election. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. So as you all are undoubtedly aware, one of the major political metas coming from the right, outside of Chinese balloons and gas stoves and other culture war takes, is the idea that there's some sort of inappropriate relationship between the federal government and mainstream and social media. And this idea is embodied in the so-called Twitter files, which were released towards the end of last year and are still, as far as I know, ongoing with various, updated installments. And the central thesis of the Twitter files is that during the 2020 presidential election cycle, the federal government was, animated by an anti-Trump sentiment, an anti-Republican sentiment, and it was leveraging its influence on mainstream and social media to try to get Joe Biden elected, right? And they were appealing to anti-Trump activists in mainstream and social media, and that there, again, was just this inappropriate relationship. And of course, the federal government at the time, being led by Donald Trump, the incumbent president, a Republican, and the FBI, who is, indicted, basically, not criminally, but morally indicted in the Twitter files as being the primary agent of this nefarious influence campaign. It was also being led by a Republican, a Trump-appointed Republican at that. Set all that aside. That's the central thesis of the Twitter files. And we're having congressional hearings by Jim Jordan and James Comer and others about the Twitter files and social media and all these things. So Republicans are doing everything in their power, and so are their conservative mouthpieces in mainstream and social media, to try to make this case that the 2020 election was unfair and, government had its thumb on the scale against Trump, even though he led the government, and mainstream and social media had their thumb on the scale against Trump, even though we found out during these congressional hearings that Twitter in particular bent over backwards to accommodate Donald Trump, even after he brazenly, violated the decorum of Twitter, broke the rules a couple of times. They went back and changed their rules to accommodate Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the sitting president, tried to get Twitter to delete tweets of celebrities that he didn't like because he found those tweets insulting. So all these things, despite all of that, that's the central thesis of the Twitter files and this latest, media blitz by Republicans and conservative commentators. But what's interesting is newly released court documents reveal that actually there was a sinister relationship, a hyper-partisan, really dangerous relationship between mainstream and social media and the government. And what I mean by that is, so let's dial it back. During the 2020 presidential election, there were people in Trump's orbit, his two attorneys who worked for him, Rudy Giuliani, obviously, Sidney Powell, another, that during the election cycle and in the aftermath, were making the claim that Dominion voting machines, right, the voting machines which were primarily used in the 2020 presidential election, that they were artificially switching the results of ballots against Donald Trump for Joe Biden. That people would go in, vote for Trump, and then the voting machines would change that vote to Biden. This was constantly being peddled on OAN, Newsmax, and on Fox News, on Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, who are the unholy trinity of Fox News opinion commentators, and they're A-list Fox News celebrities, right? And they offered no evidence for their claims. They constantly teased it. We've got so much proof. We've got conclusive proof. It's time-stamped. It's videotaped. It's conclusive. It's beyond question. Donald Trump had the election stolen from him because of Dominion voting machines. And then Dominion filed a lawsuit against them for defamation. They're like, look, you libeled and slandered us on screen and on print. You offered no evidence for your claims. We're suing you for $1.6 billion. And Fox News' collective sphincters clenched, right? And so the court documents in question pertain to this lawsuit because, of course, Fox News doesn't want to pay $1 billion, or 1.6 or $2 billion, or probably $5 even. They want this lawsuit to be kicked aside. And so they're petitioning judges to get it kicked out. Well, the lawsuits failed, and the attempts to get the lawsuit to end have failed. And now Dominion is free to continue to make its case against Fox News. And they may very well fail, right? Dominion may lose its lawsuit, but Fox's attempt to get the lawsuit kicked out have failed. And during the release of these court documents, what you find is that major Fox leaders, including Rupert Murdoch, right, who is the chairman of Fox Corporation, he's, again, he's basically arguably, the most influential conservative in American media for the past 50 years, right? But not just him. Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, and producers and people and writers associated with those programs, they knew. We got text messages revealed in these court documents. They knew that the claims made by Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and others were crap. They were skeptical. They were like, we'll break it down. But the revelations from this are extraordinary. So top host and executive at Fox News privately slammed former President Trump's election fraud claims as total BS, according to court documents filed in Dominion Voting Systems' defamation lawsuit against Fox. The filing argues that Fox knew Donald Trump lost the election, while Fox viewers heard a different story, repeatedly. The voting machine company is seeking $1.6 billion in damages and alleges the network knowingly spread misinformation about Dominion's role in non-existent voter fraud. Dozens of Fox News hosts, producers, and senior executives are quoted in the court documents. Fox said in a statement, "There will be a lot of noise and confusion generated by Dominion and their opportunistic private equity owners, but the core of this case remains about freedom of the press and freedom of speech, which are fundamental rights afforded by the Constitution and protected by New York Times v. Sullivan." The redacted communications and testimonies from depositions take aim at Trump allies, including attorneys Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, who spread conspiracy theories about Dominion machines. Tommy Firth, a producer for Laura Ingraham's show, texted a Fox executive on November 8, 2020, "This Dominion bleep is going to give me a bleeping aneurysm. As many times as I've told Laura it's BS, she sees bleep posters and Trump tweeting about it." Host Sean Hannity testified that the whole narrative that Sidney was pushing, I did not believe it for 1 second, despite inviting her onto his show without challenging her claims, per the filing. On January 6, 2021, the filing says host Tucker Carlson texted that Trump is a demonic force, a destroyer, but he's not going to destroy us. Per the court document, Fox Corps chair Rupert Murdoch told Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott, "It's been suggested our primetime three, Ingraham, Carlson, Hannity, should independently or together say something like the election is over and Joe Biden won, and that such a statement would go a long way to stop the Trump myth that the election was stolen." Murdoch at one point called the baseless voter fraud claims really crazy stuff in a text, okay? And so Washington Post, that was from Axios, and I like Axios because they just condense things to like the bare bones. But there are like analyses coming out of the Washington Post, the New York Times, a great Twitter thread by the Daily Beast journalist Will Sommer, who breaks it down with screenshots from the various court documents. Here's Rupert Murdoch telling Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott to focus on winning the Georgia Senate races for Republicans, helping in any way we can. Trump will concede eventually, and we should concentrate on Georgia, helping any way we can. We don't want to antagonize Trump further, but Giuliani taken with a large grain of salt. Everything at stake here. Sounds pretty freaking partisan to me, right? And that's coming from the top guy down. Tucker rages and tries to get Fox News reporter Jackie Heinrich fired after she admits the election wasn't stolen. Even though Tucker Carlson knew the election wasn't stolen, the fact that someone else on his program or on the network admitted it publicly was enough to not only piss him off, but to try to get her fired. Isn't that cancel culture? Right? Trying to punish somebody for not only an opinion, but in this case, a verifiable fact. Interesting. So, there's so many interesting things in the reporting surrounding this. But what the thesis is, the important part is this. Fox News is not a journalistic outlet. They have become less credible, even in terms of their hard reporting over time. Shep Smith is gone. Chris Wallace is gone. Brett Baer and Neil Cavuto, who's on Fox Business, right, which is it's part of the Fox umbrella, but these are the only two vaguely credible journalists left. And Brett Baer, in my opinion, has collapsed into free fall, right? This is a propaganda arm. Much, much, much more so than CNN, than MSNBC. If you go to CNN's website, or the New York Times for that matter, you will find examples, or the Associated Press, or Reuters, or wherever, you will find all kinds of examples of op-eds, or articles slamming Biden, criticizing Biden, referring to the latest Biden crisis. The so-called mainstream media, like CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, all these things. I have no doubt that their journalists have a left-leaning or Democratic bias. I don't contest that for a second. But in terms of their business model, in terms of how they report, their bias is towards sensationalism and clicks and headlines, right? They don't have nearly as much of a partisan agenda as Fox News. Fox News has a partisan ideological agenda, and they've been able to monetize it in a way that the others haven't. The others will throw Biden under the bus in a heartbeat if it gets them clicks, right? If it gets them news coverage. So they'll both sides an issue. They'll put out a controversial op-ed criticizing Biden at the height of something that he did successfully, because of course they're also trying to appeal somewhat to moderate and conservative viewers. Fox News is a breed apart. It's its own animal. It is relentlessly, disgustingly partisan. And at the time that this was going on, Donald Trump was the sitting president of the United States, and then in the aftermath, a former president, but still the leader of the Republican Party. These court documents reveal that this is to me, it's not even to me. This is simply a matter of fact. This is much bigger in terms of its substance than the Twitter files, because we have concrete, conclusive evidence. It's not just contributions, right? People constantly talking about the Twitter files will appeal to the fact that, well, Twitter employees donated much more to Democratic candidates and causes than they ever did Republican. It's true. Again, I have no doubt that most Twitter employees are Democrat, or at least were, before Elon Musk took over. But not only do you have all kinds, I'm sure, of contributions from Fox News employees and stars and leaders to the Republican Party, you have concrete texts and deposition in which they knowingly spread disinformation. They knew that it was BS. They knew it wasn't true. They knew the claims were crazy. They've said it in text messages to one another and to staff members and to members of the Republican Party, but then knowingly platformed these people without pushback. They knowingly spread this disinformation without pushback. That is cynical and disgusting in a way that the Twitter files just simply aren't, right? So this is the true story. You will not see Fox News cover this story. You will not see the Twitter files authors like Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and others. I highly doubt you will see them talk about this because, of course, despite claiming to be disaffected leftists, they're conservative. They are, for all intents and purposes, conservative. This should get as much attention, if not more, actually more, than the Twitter files. There should be investigations into this, right? But congressional Republicans don't care, right? Because Fox News is on their side. So as far as they're concerned, they don't want any scrutiny of this. But the other thing I'll just remind you is the consequences, right? The stakes. Spreading disinformation during the 2020 election cycle and in the aftermath has done perhaps irreparable damage to our civic institutions and our functioning as a political amalgamation in the United States. Voter fraud does occur. As a matter of fact, Republicans tend to be guilty of it, according to the Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing think tank which tracks, charged and prosecuted and convicted cases of voter fraud. A lot of them are Republican, FYI. But it's such a statistical blip, right? Every election that's ever happened in the United States has had voter fraud in it, but nothing that would ever change the outcome. And we knew that along the way. But Donald Trump in 2016, and definitely in 2020, and his enablers in the conservative mainstream and social media, Fox News in particular, they have created this unearned, dangerous skepticism and conspiracism among the Republican base and among conservatives. And the thing about conspiracy theories is I shouldn't say you can't, but it's incredibly difficult to debunk in a satisfactory way. Think about every conspiracy theory. Think about people who think that the moon landing was faked and that, 9/11 was an inside job. These things have been addressed and refuted. But the thing about conspiracism is it's much easier to trigger conspiracy in others than it is to get a conspiracy theorist to leave the conspiracy behind, right? That's the advantage of dishonesty, right? Think of every false accusation that's ever made against a person, right? Even if it is knowingly debunked, there's still a stigma associated with that, right? That is just unfortunately the inherent advantage and stain of lies. That's why it's kind of like how in the color palette, if you've got, white paint and you introduce a drop of any different color, no matter how much white you add to that paint, it will never be white again. It will be some shade of gray. That's kind of an analogy of how these things are advantage towards conspiracism and, just dishonesty. This is incredibly dangerous, especially when it's coming from the most popular news outlet in the United States, which Fox News is. And when it's, working in tandem or working at the behest of the Republican Party, which is a nexus of dishonesty from George Santos to Donald Trump. And so all these things, it's incredibly dangerous to the United States, and this should get all kinds of coverage. And if there's any of you who are like, what about the Twitter files? What about the Twitter files? Take a look at this story. It is infinitely more damaging to the health of the United States and infinitely more substantive in its coverage than any aspersions that are coming out of the Twitter files. So let's keep our eyes on this. Hey, you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.